time, before we move through our agenda, I'd like to welcome Susan Harris, who is a new member of the Board of Trustees. I think this is her first official meeting, so we're certainly glad to have you with us today. So I call your attention now to the agenda. The first item that we have is an approval of our agenda. So we need a motion to approve. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Not all those in favor of approving the agenda say aye. Aye. Any opposed? If the agenda then is approved. The next item is the approval of our minutes from our December 18th, 2012 meeting. Everyone should have received these in advance. So are there any additions or corrections? And if not, we can entertain a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The next item that we have on our agenda is Senate Concurrent Resolution 537. We have a couple of special guests with us here today. We have Bill Gunn, Speaker of the House, which we certainly welcome you, Mr. Speaker, Senator David Blunt. So, Senator Blunt, Speaker, I'll turn it over to you now.
All right, thank you so much. We are honored to be here today. Senator Blunt is taking the lead here on drafting a concurrent resolution paying tribute to 60 years of public service and dedication to Dr. Virgil Ballou of Clinton, Mississippi. And we understand you're retiring again. Seems to be you're the expert of retiring. Because he does it a lot, he keeps doing other things. But Dr. Ballou, we are so honored to call you friend. For those of you who don't know, Dr. Ballou was the first superintendent of the Clinton Separate School District back in 1970, probably, 69, 70. And along about 1972, or thereabouts, was kind enough to give my mother her first job, teaching school at Clinton. She was a music teacher. I had actually the minutes of that meeting the other day, a while back. I served on the Clinton School Board for 11 years, from about 1994 to 2004 or so. And during the course of my service, they actually produced for me the minutes of that meeting. I think it was about 1972 or 3, where Dr. Ballou recommended my mother for a job. And that's what brought us to Clinton. It's been the best thing that ever happened in my childhood. And I was able to grow up in Clinton and in a school system that was recognized as one of the best in the state. And as you all know, that all begins at the top. And Dr. Virgil Ballou is recognized as a leader in education. He retired from the Clinton schools along about 1989 or so. When did you retire, Doc?
92.
92. And so we're just proud of you and your accomplishments. Senator Blunt was kind enough to get this resolution drafted. I'm going to let him make that presentation. And we just want to take an opportunity to come over here and tell you how proud we are of you and commend you for your years of service and give you this resolution. So congratulations, Steve.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Senator Blunt.
Well, speakers said it better than I can say it. I mean, after a career in education, which is still one of the top 3 school districts in the state, Dr. Ballou didn't just go fishing. He came here to work on behalf of all of those firms. And that's what you I feel strongly about it. The speaker feels strongly about it. It just is an amazing career in public service. And so we do us support. And also Senator Emily Frazier, who is busy across the street. I want to recognize you. Thank you for your work in the Clinton School District and as a member of this board. We appreciate what all of you do for the public. So thank you, Dr.
And I have returned the favor, Doc, because I think I signed this resolution. You want to give this to you? Thanks so much, Doc. We appreciate you. Thank y'all for letting us take a minute. Thank y'all. Y'all have a good day.
I want to tell you that the speaking was a student leader And I predicted then that he would be the governor someday. Oh, he doesn't let us down.
Thank you, Doc. Appreciate it.
Thank y'all.
Thank you very much.
We'll move on. The next item on our agenda is Employee of the Quarter. And it's certainly a pleasure for me to be able to present this award today. The individual that we are recognizing today as Employee of the Quarter began working for PERS in October of 2003 as a purchasing chief, and he currently serves as the Chief Fiscal Officer in the accounting department. He was nominated because of his positive attitude and for going the extra mile every day for PERS employees. One of the things that they mentioned was that when they become flustered when equipment breaks down, and I think particularly maybe in terms of printers and those types of things, that he always makes sure that there are plenty of supplies and they get everything fixed and doing like they should. So they say he goes above and beyond what he needs to do in his job, and certainly is willing to help everyone. So I'd like to recognize Joey Roberts as the Employee of the Quarter.
Mr. Chairman, I'll let you sit down. It's my pleasure to bring this to you, Mr. Chairman, that the Public Pension Council has once again awarded the retirement system for the 8th straight consecutive year. This award is the Public Pension Standards Award for Funding and Administration. And it's in recognition of the systems meeting this standards in the area of planning, plan design, funding, actuarial, and financial audit, as well as member communications.
Very good. Thank you, and thank the staff for all that you do. For the staff, we wouldn't receive that award. So thank y'all. We'll now begin with reports from our committees, and our first report is from the Administrative Committee. Mr. Benson.
Mr. Chairman, the Administrative Committee met this morning, and the first thing out of order of business was to approve the election results for the retiree slot in 56, I believe, candidates running, and we certified the results, of which the top two were Sam Valentine and Randy McCoy, and I would move certification of those results.
Okay, we have a motion to certify the election results. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion? Not all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, certify the results.
And as the second part of that, the Administrative Committee also approved the ballot to be issued for the runoff in that election between Mr. Valentine and Dr. McCoy, and I would move the approval of that ballot.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the runoff ballot for the retiree representative. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Ballot's approved.
The other thing, the other order of business that the committee approved was to amend Regulation 60, which sets the contribution rates at 15.75% effective July. The board has already approved those rates. This just amended the regulation to put those in place for PERS and for ORT, I believe, also. And I was
Okay, we have a motion to amend Regulation 60. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Any discussion? Not all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
The only other orders of business, there's no other orders of business. The committee did receive some reports that you'd find behind tab 2C, which showed some of the efficiencies of staff. One of those being microfilm, taking the microfilm and converting it to images to make those more accessible. And the other, some printing agreements that the staff is entered into, which I think they can save $24,000, I believe was the savings for this year. We also had a presentation by Ms. Shelley Powers about our site on our place on the web page, which allows us to get our agenda and our web and our information, which may save us a lot of trees by being able to do that. And do appreciate the staff and what they did. Gregory presented the other presentation on the microfilm and the printer issues. Nice example of what they do, and I think the website's really going to be a time saver. With that concludes the report.
Thank you, Mr. Benson. Our next committee report is from Dr. Miller of the Claims Committee.
The Claims Committee is under 3B in your book. The Claims Committee met on January 29th to consider an appeal by a MERS member in regard to his effective retirement date. This had been reviewed by the staff, and the executive director had made a decision in complete concert with MERS regulations and with state law, and his appeal had been turned down at that level, and he wished to be heard by the Claims Committee. The Claims Committee met on the 29th, as I have mentioned, and we heard testimony from PERS, from the appellant, his wife, and a thorough discussion of regulations and state law, and the committee voted to uphold the executive director's decision. And I so move for the committee.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to accept the report from the Claims Committee on upholding the executive director's decision. Is there any discussion? Not all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Under 3B, you will find there are two applications for various organizations to join PERS. And the first one is from the West Rankin Utility Authority, who wish to join PERS both for Social Security and for retirement coverage for all its employees. This has been investigated completely by staff. The committee met this morning, heard staff's recommendations, and voted at the committee meeting this morning to accept the West Rankin Utility Authority, and for the committee, I so move at the present time for the board.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve this agreement with the West Rankin Utility Authority. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
The second item which was considered this morning was a modification of their agreement of the Clinton County Board of Supervisors, who wanted to add their constables. And the staff had looked into this in detail. The committee approved this at the committee meeting this morning, and for the committee, I so move.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to allow the Covington County Board of Supervisors to amend their agreement to include coverage for constables. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
There are no other recommendations.
Thank you, Dr. Miller.
Mr. Wilson, if you'll give a report of the audit committee, please, sir.
Sure. The audit committee met this morning to review the timeline for issuing a request for proposals for audit services. Our current contract with KPMG is up this year, and so we met to review the timeline for issuing the RFP, approving the contract, and then for ultimately commencing and completing the audit for this year. And the audit committee approved this timeline, and I would move the board to the second.
We have a motion to approve the timeline. Do we have a second?
Second.
And we have a second. Any discussion about it? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Timeline is approved. Okay, the next item will be a report of the defined contribution committee. Dr. Hill.
Mr. Chairman of the board, the Defined Contribution Committee met on Monday morning
We have a number of items to discuss. We also reviewed the performance review for the last quarter for the deferred compensation and work plan. Our first item that we approved was the changes to the ORP plan documents. The committee approved it, and it's also moved that we accept the committee's recommendation to make some changes to the ORP plan documents.
Okay, we have a motion to approve an amended plan document for the optional retirement plan. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Any discussion on any changes? Not all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Also, the committee met to approve the timeline for major changes, major criteria for the third quarter administrative request for proposal, which will be effective March 1st. I also move that we accept the committee's recommendation to approve these timelines.
All right, we have a timeline in terms of, I think, the selection of a third-party administrator. And we have a motion to approve that timeline. Is there a second? Okay, we have a second. Any discussion about it? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Timelines.
The third item was the finalists, that we reviewed the finalists for the REAP fund search, and we approved 3 managers to come effectively on March 25th to actually review those changes. So I so move that we approve these 3 candidates for this search item.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the 3 finalists to make presentations on March 25th. Is there a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Not all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Finalists are
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the Defined Contribution Committee report.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Hill. Mr. McMillan, if you'll give us our investment committee report.
Investment committee met on yesterday and for a really long time. I'll get to that shortly. We had the second quarter performance review. We also had a watch list that we looked at, reviewed, made no changes there. But then we have a action item here, the ACWI ex-US Manager Search, which is the All-Country World Index. I'm sure that's a new thing. But anyway, we're going to have those final presentations on March 25th. They were reviewed by staff as well as our consultant, Callan, and that would be behind tab 6A, for your review if you like. The 3 finalists are Harold Street, Bill Guilford, and Thomas White. So I would move that we accept those as final presentations to be done on March 25th.
We have a motion to approve the 3 finalists. Do we have a second?
Second.
And we have a second. Any discussion? Not all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
The next item, we talked about the asset liability model input, the discussion we had there, and we may want Ms. Tingle to come up or somebody to give us a little bit more information about that possibly. But basically, we've been talking about our absolute return part of our portfolio for the last, or the allocation plan for the last 2 or 3 years. I know we already worked on it last year, and a lot of other staff at length. And came up with contractual issues that we have there with the firm that we were looking at trying to. They would quite accept our terms when it got down to a couple of issues, and so we didn't do anything there. Basically, Ms. Tingle's and I think the rest of the staff have concluded that to go into some sort of a hedge fund of some sort, you really wouldn't be getting enough return to justify all of the expense and the other things that we have to do there. So the recommendation is to constrain our exposure to hedge funds to 0% in the asset liability modeling process that's currently being conducted by Callan and Associates. So that is my motion.
Okay, a second. We have a motion and a second to, I guess,
Constrain the exposure to hedge funds to 0.
All right. Any discussion or questions for our chairman? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Motion passes.
All right. The
most of all the afternoon, we spent listening to annual presentations from our mid and small cap managers. We heard from Dimensional Fund Advisors, Wellington Asset Management, the Boston Company, Artisan Partners, Mondrian, which have British accents, and Pyramids. I tell you what, though, I was very impressed with it's Mondrian, that's what you pronounce it. Very impressed with the presenters there. Maybe they got later in the afternoon and I'd woken up or something. All of them had very good reports, so I think we can conclude there. The one area, the Boston, the small cap value, is struggling a little bit. This is one that we picked up last year. They know that so we're watching them closely. They think that performance will improve considerably. They know they're under the gun, so they're watching it closely. One of I guess the main reason for the lackluster performance, as much as anything given by the gentleman that was here presenting, was the fact that it was more or less a tax issue. A lot of the, 2 or 3 of the funds anyway that they were invested in sold off at the end of the year to avoid the capital gains tax, which they anticipated was going to increase at the beginning of this year, which did in fact happen. So they think that the funds are still good. They think the performance will improve considerably next quarter, so we'll be watching those closely. But the rest of them are really, they've done well, mainly because of the last quarter of 12 was an improvement for everybody. It's the score 110, you can tell. So that's just for information. That concludes the business of the investment committee. That's the one has questions.
Dr. Ballou, report of the legislative committee.
The legislative committee met this morning and discussed pending legislation that may or may not affect PERS. There were 8 bills really, and I'll just briefly mention them. House Bill 563 would require the PERS to divest of any investments in oil-related or mineral extracting activities in the land. Some people may think that's pretty good, but then when we get into telling our managers what stocks they can buy and can't buy, then this is going to make a big difference in returns. House Bill 733 has to do with constables, and every year we have bills pertaining to constables. So I don't really know what they're all about, but I just know we have them all the time. House Bill 990 would allow PERS to make investments consistent with the current investment environment and to update the investment opportunities to allow PERS to take advantage of additional options. House Bill 1015 would increase the driver's license reinstatement fee from $25 to $75, which says don't lose your license. And 25 of that 75 would go to increase the Highway Safety Control Fund, and 25 would go to PERS for administrative funds and so forth. House Bill 1174 has to do with there are people who earn compensation when they live in a government-owned house, school district house, or whatever. The value's put on that, and they're able to count that as part of their earned compensation, which does increase their retirement benefit. And this bill would grandfather in those who are doing now, but eliminate it in the future. House Bill 1623 is the deadline for the Senate action. This is the PERS appropriation bill. And we discussed that, and for the benefit of those who don't know, the legislature does not pay 1 penny for the operation of PERS. That's all the staff, this building, and all expenses has to be paid from the trust fund, and it is appropriated by the legislature after their permission to spend. And then finally, there was House Bill 24-5, which is other than has to do with the constables. And since I don't understand what's going on with that, I'll just make that announcement. We have nothing to be acted on by the board, just to report. Thank you, sir, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Floyd. We'll now hear about our Disability Appeals Committee report.
Mr. Chairman, this summer I was here to give the Disability Appeals Committee report, which is behind that page. Mr. Chairman, you should have received copies of each recommendation that's being made by the Disability Appeals Committee. The 8 recommendations being made, 4 are recommended for approval and 4 are denied. We're asking for approval of the recommendations.
We all received these in advance. Anybody have any questions or comments? If not, we need a motion to approve. We have a motion. We have a second. Second by Dr. Peel. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the next item on the agenda is the appointments to the Insurance Advisory Committee, and Mr. Rickard is here to show that and that information committee found behind tab 9.
Mr. Chairman, we currently have 2 vacancies on the Retiree Insurance Advisory Committee. I'm here today trying to fill this position with Charles Buddy Dodrill and George Terry. The short biographical sketches on each behind the tab there. If approved, they will serve a 3-year term beginning January 1st, 2012, ending October 31st, 2015. They are filling expired terms. Gene Harley, who served a maximum 2-term limit, and Dr. Brewer, who served 1 term.
So we have a recommendation for 2 appointments to the Retiree Insurance Advisory Committee. Dr. Hill. So we have a motion by Dr. Hill. Do we have a second? Second. Second. Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mr. Chairman, the next item on the agenda are the municipal retirement system evaluation report. And I recommend with us today from Patton and Fallon to give that report, and I think
Mr. Chair,
Thank y'all.
ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here. Just since we have a couple of new board members, if I could take 2 minutes to remind all of us why we're talking about the municipal retirement systems. These are 17 city systems that were closed in the early 1980s. They have been in tremendous trouble. I actually, I'm going to date myself, I remember there were studies in 1979 where some of them had less assets than the accumulated member contributions to the system. So had the system gone out, they could not even give members back their contributions, let alone pay for retirement benefits. So the systems were taken over by PERS and operated from that point forward. They were closed to new members. All new members, new hires of those cities are now in PERS. But these systems held on, and so we're looking at a closed system. Ed will go through some of the details on the data and the like, but just as a reminder, they are closed, and we're trying to get to a point where we've got sufficient money to get us to the end, and they'll remind us of the change we made last year in the funding policy, but we don't have too much money at the end because that just is going to create issues when we get close to that between the then retirees and the cities. I believe you have gotten the aggregate report. We also will be meeting with municipal reps tomorrow, which is what we do every year. For those who want to come, we will go through basically the same presentation that you'll see, and then we stay and meet individually with any city reps that want to meet with us to talk about issues. They also get an individual report, so there are 17 separate reports that will be available for them tomorrow to pick up. And will be adjusted to their numbers as opposed to the aggregate.
Yes. And just for your information, those who do not send representatives
as well as those who send representatives tomorrow, we do communicate and provide the governing organization of each one of these municipalities with copies of these reports, so they're made aware of it.
On that note, I think I'll turn it over to Ed, and Jonathan and I will get to play backbenchers and just throw in comments as we go.
All right. Great. Well, since we do have a new board member, Ms. Harrison, she hasn't had the privilege of hearing not on the favorite slide. We thought we would go through this, so I apologize to all of you who've seen this multiple times. But this equation is so important, especially in this plan, where it is a closed system. And our analysis is based on a cash flow of each of the systems, of each of the municipalities. So we talked about the basic retirement funding equation. This is for any defined benefit pension plan. And basically what it says is what comes in has to equal what goes out. So we have what's coming into the trust fund, our contributions that the members are paying and the municipalities are paying based on the millage rates. And then the fund is earning some interest on that money. And what is going out of the benefits payments to those retirees and any administrative expenses. So our benefit payments are dependent on the plan provisions of the benefit structure of the system, what retirees are getting paid based on the formula, and the experience of the system. If folks are living longer, benefit payments are remaining at a high level. And we'll go through kind of the analysis of the membership and see who's sticking around and where folks are. The C is dependent on two things. Short term, it's dependent on the assumptions that we use and the actual cost method. But on a long-term basis, the C is very dependent on all three of the other systems, and that's why you see this. If investment income is much larger, contributions don't necessarily have to increase at a certain rate. If you have very bad performance in your investments, that may drive contribution rates up. So we'll get into some of the results. I first want to, Tom said we're going to go through, just mention the new funding policy that was back in 2011. But I thought just for some of the newer board members, just talk about what the old funding policy was. It was set up back in 1980, at the end of the 80s, 90, when the system was closed. And what it was the millage. Each year we come and calculate a millage rate that the municipalities would make their contributions based on millage rate multiplied by the assessed property values for each of the cities. Well, those contributions were going to end as of September 30th of 2020. So we still have a lot of members in this system. Still some active members, but a lot of retiree members. So the funds would have to have had enough assets as of that date in order to cover the remaining benefit payments for all the retirees that were going to receive benefits for the next 50 or so years. But what we came into realization a couple years ago was, what if right after 2020, 2021, or 2022, we have another economic recession like 2008 and 2009, where the trust loses 20 to 25%. We budgeted that we'd have enough assets, enough contributions in there as of 2020, and we didn't want to have to come back in 2 years or 3 years or whenever and ask for a millage rate increase. As most of you know, statute says millage rates cannot increase by more than $0.5 for each of these cities. And if we did some analysis on this, and we determined if they did lose about 20 to 25% of its assets, we could see some millage rates significantly increasing after those years. So what we did was, in 2011, we worked with you guys and the staff, and we put together this new funding policy that allowed contributions to continue past this 9/30/2020 date. And what we did was we established an asset reserve level equal to a reasonable percentage of the next year's benefit payments. So we do a cash flow analysis, really. We take the market value of assets, we say what's coming in contributions, what's going out in benefit payments, what do we have, we get some investment income, what do we have for the next year? Okay, we go down to the next line, the next year. We kind of do this projection of the cash flow to determine what our millage rate should be set at. So a lot of the funds still have, most of the cities still have enough assets to cover benefit payments for many number of years. There's one plan I think has about 2 or 3 years in reserves of assets right now to cover their benefit payments. But we said, well, let's figure out a target millage rate right now that the city could budget for the next few years until their asset levels come down to a level where they have this target or this asset reserve level. And what we set it at was about 100 to 150% of the next year's benefit payments. Now we have some assumptions that we had to use in developing this funding policy and the development of our cash flow analysis. One is an investment return assumption at 6.5%. Now the current assets in this fund are commingled with PERS and highway patrol and SLRP assets, so they're on the same allocation. But we wanted to go a little bit more conservative and say, well, let's just assume that the fund gains 6.5% for each year of this projection. We also wanted to assume that the assessed property values wouldn't increase. We wanted to be conservative with that. And we have a slide that kind of shows what's happened the last year and the last 4 years of assessed property values. And you have some that have gone up and some that have come down. So I think this is a very conservative assumption, and a very good one. And the last part of the funding policy was to say that any benefit improvements, any municipality that wanted to come in and said they wanted to improve their cost of living adjustment for their members would have to be funded through increases in the millage rates. So let's just get into some of the data. Again, this is a snapshot date as of September 30th. As of this past September 30th, there's still 21 active members in this system, still kicking around, and some will go through a little bit of the individual cities, but it's 21 folks still active members. We lost 4 to the prior year, so some still members there. The retiree count is starting to decrease, so we're starting to see a lot of those folks who are close to 90 years old, 100 years old. We have a couple of folks who are even over 100 years old. So we're seeing a lot more deaths that are coming into the future. So this is we'll keep an eye on this and see where the membership goes. The assets have also been.
And if I might interject,
Yes,
just for a minute. The pattern that you see with the number of actives and the number of retirees is a direct relationship on why we adopted a funding policy, so that not only would there be enough sufficient funds on hand to pay those benefits, but as importantly, there would not be a surplus at some point in time, that you would have more assets than needed to pay the benefits when the retirees had all died.
So we show the assets as of the last 10 years on September 30th. We show both the market value and the actuarial value here. The new funding policy, the new cash flow projections where we develop the millage rates are based on market value basis. The actuarial value has been in place. We've used that for the old funding policy. That's what the old millage rates were based on. Each municipality has the discretion of which funding policy to follow. Most have chosen to go to base their millage rates on the new funding policy, but there are a couple of municipalities out there who are still kind of keeping their millage rate at a higher level, which is fine by us. We'd rather get that money in to the system now as it can be. And we'll worry about what happens down the road, when we just have retirees left in the system. So we do show this smoothing of the gains and losses. You see this a lot on the PERS and the other plans, where we have a smooth actuarial value of assets, and it smooths the gains and losses of each of the last 5 years, 20% each year. So we avoid the peaks and the valleys that occur in the market because we're looking at a snapshot of dates. But you can tell that just the last two valuations, the market value and actuarial value, have been very, very close. They're just hovering right over $150 million in the trust. And this next slide just goes through and shows what this goes back to my first slide, the C plus I equals B plus E. This is what's coming in versus what's going out. This is the cash flow. So you can see the blue line here with the squares of the contributions. They've been increasing the last few years. They were at right over $20 to $22 million now that are coming in contributions. The red line, are the benefit payments. You kind of see they've kind of flattened out and they're starting to even come back towards that $30 million mark as retirees are deceasing into the system. Retiree benefit payments are going down. We did want to mention one thing, the asterisk at the bottom. The investment income line there, the green line, is based on the June 30 numbers. That's why, as of June 30th, the investment income was close to zero. If you all remember the PERS plan, it was in a very good return on market value on that annual basis. It was right around 0.4 or 0.5% return for the annual basis. Everybody knows the third quarter of 2012 was very good. However, the system recognizes that trust fund as of June 30th, but we do use the contributions and benefit payments for the fiscal year going through. So that was just one thing we wanted to clarify there. The total liability of the system is decreasing. You can see here, this compares 2011 to 2012. We've gone from $364 million down to $357. You can see actives are now down below $9 million in total liability. This next slide just says how is this financed. Right now, of the $357 million, there's $155 million of current assets to cover. So it's less than 50% that we currently have in assets to cover the total liability of the system. There is a small little sliver, can't really see it, there for member contributions for those 21 folks who are still active members. They're still going to pay their share of their benefits. And then the rest has to be made up by the employer. And that's when we come in and calculate the millage rates in our cash flow projection. So the next 6 slides, I'm just going to go through and just show what each of the municipalities shows. And I know tomorrow this is more beneficial to them because they like to look at their system and see where they're at. I'll just make a few little notes here on what we saw in the data and assessed property value and the millage rates. Again, we lost 4 people in the system. There was 1 from Hattiesburg, 1 or 2 from Jackson. The Clinton group has the most active members. They're also the youngest. Their average age is still right around 55, so they still may have a few more years until they do retire.
The reason for that, by the way, is the Clinton group was the last one to close, had a closed system. So they had some new members coming in when some of the others had already been closed, which is what the age difference is.
And just from a historical perspective, I think the plans were closed between 1975 and 87. And then the administration transferred to PERS in 87. So as Tom said, some of these plans were closed as early as 75 and some as late as 87. and that's why you see such a rate.
All right, so this is the first half of the groups, and then the participation data for the second half. One thing we want to mention here, Macomb did have an extra retiree. A beneficiary showed up in the data this year from a death from last year. So it was kind of an administration delay. I think the person died right at the end of the fiscal year last year, and the beneficiary came into the books. So we did have one extra Macomb retiree this year, and they have the largest increase in their millage rate due to that, because there's only 31 folks. One extra member not significantly increases, but did increase their liabilities, which in turn resulted in an increased millage rate. I will note also the Meridian folks, there are 3 active members still holding on. Their average age is 73 years old with 47 years of service on average. So they don't know which is actually an actuarial gain to the system. We were talking about this earlier. That's a gain to the system. The more people stay in active service, it's better towards the system. We're not paying retiree benefits out to those folks. They're still contributing money to their pensions. So that actually is a gain. Yes.
One thing that's of interest as it relates to all this, a couple things. One, these plans, and I think all of them have a cap, don't they?
Yeah. Clinton's 87%, the others are 2/3.
Yeah.
So you get 50% of your benefit every 20 years of service, and you get another 1 and 2/3 after that.
Yeah.
But a maximum of 2/3 of final average pay, except for Clinton, which has a maximum of 87% of final average pay. So the fact that the 3 Meridian folks have 47 years is not getting them any more benefit unless their pay is going up, and they get a little bit of an increment. You're not adding on another 1 2/3 or 2% of payroll every year. The multiplier is not changing if they cap on the multiplier. It's only if their pay goes up, they'll get a little bit more money. So the system is a whole lot better off if they just keep right on with it. Presumably they are happy.
So you can see we have 21 active members, about 1.1 million in payroll, 1,978 retirees in total, about just over $35 million in benefit payments. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sure I've asked this question before, but refresh my memory, but Bill could answer, he's expert. I remember this when they heard of these, when I lived across the street on the other thing, set up the municipal system. But my question is this the only system that these people are in? They're not also inverters, right? They're elected to stay in this system.
Well, if, for example, if someone retired from Jackson Fire and Police, and this has occurred, they could go to work for another city. They cannot go to work continue to move out from under the Jackson Fire and Police plan and be a member of the Jackson Fire Department under PERS. They could go to Brandon.
Madison and work for.
Yes. Yes.
These next 2 slides look at the assessed property values. We show last year's and this year's. We show the 1-year % increase and the last 4 years annual increase. And like I said, we have some that have increased this year, some that have gone down. Gulfport went down about 1.5%. Clinton is up 3.8%, but down over the last 4 years. So you can see there's some variations going on. On the second slide, Natchez is up 14.3% just this year, but on average over the last 4 years is 4.2. You see Laurel's down 5.5 and Pascagoula is down pretty significantly this year, though they're up over the 4 years. So we get to the calculation of each of the city's millage rates. We have a lot of numbers here. The current column there is obviously that is their current millage rates that's reported to the PERS staff that they're budgeting their contribution dollars on. Then we come in and we calculate the millage rates on the pre-2011 funding policy. So using our old methodology, that contributions would stop as of 9/30/2020, so we have 8 more years of contributions. So this is what the millage rate would be. You can see for a city like Clarksdale, a millage rate of 10.60 is not something that they could budget right now. And plus, with the statute only allowing them to increase by half a mil, they couldn't even get to the 10.6 for 4 plus 5 years. So our new funding policy is the post-2011 computed column there. You can see for Clarksdale, we compute a millage rate of 6.16 mils. You can see which cities have come to the post-2011 amounts. Biloxi, Clinton, Columbus, Greenville. Those have all gone to the new funding policy and based their millage rates on those. We are showing an increase in the millage rate for 8 of the 17 municipalities. None are above the half a mil increase. They're all within a couple of mils. You can see Clinton goes up 0.09 mils, and a couple others, very small amounts. The right-hand column here is the year in which we do our cash flow projections, the year in which we predict, and there's a lot of assumptions going on, of when these cities will go onto a pay-as-you-go basis. So when they can drop their millage rates, when we get to that asset reserve level, and they'll be able to drop their millage rate and kind of go to a pay-as-you-go basis. So whatever benefit payments they have to pay out, they'll make a contribution to their trust fund, and we calculate a mill based on their assessed property value at that time. Again, we're not assuming assessed property values increase over the length of the contribution period. The second group of folks here, you can see Macomb was the largest increase. They went from 2.3 mils to 2.75. So they were really close to that half a mil increase. I was getting a little worried about that one when I was looking at the calculations. So just that one retiree coming into the data made a pretty significant increase.
Let's use that as an example to just make sure we understand why we're showing you 2 columns that are exactly the same numbers. We do the calculation first and come up with the millage rate. But if that millage rate is more than a half a mil higher than what they're currently contributing, we have to certify a rate, and we can only certify a half a mil increase. So we also have a certified column, and that's why we've got 2 different columns with the same exact numbers in them. They've been the same for a number of years, but again, if I take myself and go back 15, 20 years when I was doing this, we would have a whole lot different numbers between the calculated and the computed and the certified rates as we were trying at the time to catch up. Now we are there, we're fine. As Ed said, when we hit that year, when they go to pay-as-you-go, the millage rates are likely to be quite a bit less than what we're showing right now. So there'll be a point in time when the contribution will actually drop. Of course, it will continue as long as there's a retiree around, whereas on the old policy, presumably stop in 2020, but then might have to start again if we had any losses that have to be made out. So this way, it's just a continual budgeting process that will be a smaller and smaller burden on each of the cities as we go on. One other thing, Mr. Chair, that we just want to bring up, we'll come back with a formal recommendation for you. I know you've had some discussions with regard to the new governmental accounting standards that are coming into play. This issue that Ed raised a moment ago, that the assets, we don't have true market value of assets as of September 30th. So we use the investment income through June 30th and then use contributions and benefit payments to come up with an estimated asset number as of September 30th. But when we actually get into the GASB 67 and 68, the reporting numbers, the market value of assets has to be as of the reporting date. And for PERS, the reporting date is June 30. So that's fine as far as the market value is concerned, but now we've got liabilities as of September 30th and assets as of June 30th, and that's going to create some issues for these employers because they have to report as of their reporting date, which is September 30th. So they are allowed to use a measurement date, and it's crazy, a measurement date within a year of their reporting date. So basically, as long as the measurement date used is within a year at the end of the fiscal year, you're okay. But that would have to have the market value of assets and liabilities as of that date. So now we can't have this off. So what we're going to work with staff and come back to you with a formal recommendation that we move the valuation date for all of these to June 30th, as the other systems are. Then we'll just do all of them in October when we come and see you, and everybody will have the same dates, and that will be a date that will be fine for the municipalities to use for this reporting. They'll have the same date for reporting their share of the PERS net pension liabilities, as I know you started to think through that whole cost sharing concept there. So everything will be lined up the same, and hopefully, actually, this will give them the numbers early enough that they can get them into their CAFR for that fiscal year ending. So that's kind of what we're looking at. We're going to look at the statute, but I don't think there's anything in the statute that prevents us from shifting the valuation date. So if that's the case, we'll come back to you, and probably this June, we'll be asking for the data, and we'll do the valuations as of June 30th, 13th, all of us. And that will then get everybody on the same, all the systems on the same basis.
Any more questions for them?
Thank you.
I'm going to just point out a few highlights here and a couple of things that have happened since the report was printed. As you'll remember, at the last board meeting, the board voted in the West v. PERS claims matter to affirm the executive director's decision in that matter. Ms. West did not appeal to the circuit court, so that matter is closed. So we can mark that one off. And was mentioned earlier during the today, I believe, was pointed out, we have a new hearing scheduled in the Jackson County v. PERS for March 26th. This is a little different than most claims hearings because it is employers instead of individual members or retirees that are the appellant in this one. Allison O'Neill, who is in the Civil Litigation Division and AG's office, is going to be assisting in this one. Jackson County last week did file in the Chancery Court of Jackson County a complaint for a declaratory judgment on their leave policies as we anticipated. They had told us they were going to do. We are going to respond to that motion. They are going to attempt to have the claims hearing stayed, and we're going to, of course, object to that and anticipate having a hearing in Jackson County on that one. We're actually going to discuss that tomorrow. Call set up, try to schedule that. I will be sending you out. We did send you information back when this was previously scheduled in November, I believe, but we'll update that and get that to you in short order, so you'll have plenty of time to. This one is more of a legal matter than a factual matter, so it would be good to, familiarize yourself with the issues ahead of time, because it probably make it less of a confusing hearing if you read through the policies at issue and whatnot.
This, as staff went through it, it took a lot of review and discussion, and there's a lot of ambiguity, interpretation.
No, there's no ambiguity. There's no ambiguity.
On our part, there's a lot of reading of the documents, and they say one thing versus what we were told was the practice,
Yes.
which is not documented. As it relates to the documentation, there is no ambiguity.
Right.
As it relates to what we were told
They
was the
actually did.
practice, there is some difference between the actual documentation.
There appears to be some difference in their written policy and their practice.
Well, let's just be careful. What we don't need to go into a great deal of discussion.
Exactly.
What happens if the court says one thing and the claims committee says the other?
If the court came down first, it would have precedential value. But we're going to, unless you want to go into executive session,
Who is the final arbiter here, the claims committee or the court?
well, the court, not necessarily Jackson County Chancery Court,
Yeah.
but a court of competent jurisdiction would be the final arbiter.
But if the court ruled first over PERS, then we would have a right of appeal because they're running around
Yes,
policy
yes.
on the basis that they have not exhausted their appeal process.
You're exactly right. All right, moving on quickly. We had 3 new appeals from disability decisions filed since, based on December action in the circuit court. Beyond that, there haven't been any rulings, final rulings on any of our cases. The only thing under the securities litigation that I wanted to point out is a recent settlement that is not on the report because it just occurred last week. And then the shearing file, it's number 7 under your securities litigation section. There was a joint settlement agreement in this case, shearing file and with Merck. It is not our Merck securities litigation case. It is another case against Merck, which we are not a lead plaintiff in. But the joint settlement is $688 million between the two companies. And this is a national class action. So before you ask, our recovery will probably be just a minor fraction of that. But I don't know what it will be. And lastly, in the last case on your report under the Tribune case, all briefing on our motion to dismiss has been completed in that. The response brief and the defendant's reply brief have been filed. A hearing was scheduled for this Friday before the court on that motion to dismiss, but apparently the judge had something else to do, so he moved that to April. So we will most likely, our contract with Ice Miller expires June 30th with their representation of us in this case, so we'll most likely have to do an extension on that because it doesn't look like we're going to get a ruling before that expires. Any questions? Thank you.
Chairman, Ms. Graham is here to give the retiree report. behind tab 11B. Mr. Chairman, as of the February 2013 payroll, there are 91,607 recipients receiving over $127 million, making our fiscal year to date total nearly $1.4 billion. This is a 4% recipient increase, a 6% monthly payroll increase, and an 8% fiscal year to date increase compared to this time last year. On page 2, you can see a list that gives a breakdown of the total number of recipients and amount paid per plan. And on page 3, you can see the number of recipients added and removed from payroll by plan.
Do we have any questions? Not really available to accept the retiree report, please. So moved. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mr. Chairman, the next report is the investment report, and Mr. Dottie is here to give that report back behind tab 11C.
On 11C, you'll find the report of investments as of January 31st, 2013. On page 2 is a consolidated portfolio summary with market value broken down for each asset class we hold. The market value as of January 31st stood at over $21.67 billion. The unadjusted fiscal year-to-date performance number as of January 31st was 10.8%. On page 3 and 4 is a breakdown of the portfolios currently in the fund and each manager respectively. As of January 31st, we currently have 47 portfolios being managed by 37 different investment managers. Page 5 and 6 is a breakdown of our securities lending program. At the top of page 5, there's a monthly breakdown of our earnings from the program. Fiscal year to date, the program has earned PERS just over $9 million. On page 7, there is a list on all the transfers that have occurred this fiscal year from the fund. Here I have a copy of all transactions that have occurred since the last board meeting. These are on file in the investments department for your review. I ask for your approval.
Yes, sir.
So moved.
We just have a question.
On top of page 5, you said that was fiscal year today on the securities lending. Very top right hand corner of page 5. That year to date figure.
That's correct.
Fiscal. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, we have, then, Dr. Lee, you have a question?
I have two. One is, what is, I guess you have results as of yesterday of the total in the fund and the earnings today.
The total in the fund as of yesterday? We don't have that.
21.4. And what's that return?
The return for the end of January was 10.8. It's going to be down.
10.8?
10.8, yes, sir.
Let's do like that lady, let's fast and pray to the whole
Okay, any other questions? Okay. Yes, oh, no, absolutely. We'll let everybody ask their question.
Your earnings are basically recognized in your growth. Some of these on your growth funds, recognizing the change in the market.
The earnings are you speaking?
Like say on growth, but just in general, does that include growth on the investments, just the growth?
It does.
Okay.
Any other questions? We need a motion to approve the transactions.
So,
And transfers also, transaction and transfers. Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, behind tab 11D, you have the quarterly information report, which basically details the administrative budget and what we have spent today. Your mission Crossing Hole project, deferred hardship withdrawals, retiree payroll information, and the partial lump sum, as well as the number of refunds and amount of refunds issued, and the calendar for the upcoming settlement. That's just provided for your information. Also, behind tab 11E is a copy of the hardship withdrawals that have been approved by staff and are being provided again just for your information. I'll be happy to answer any questions as it relates to those.
Anyone have any questions, Ms. Roberts?
Mr. Chairman, under tab 12A, tab 12 other business, under A, you have information related to upcoming staff and trustee continuing education and conferences. This 69th Annual Southern Conference on Future Retirement will be hosted by the Public School and Education Employee Retirement System of Missouri in St. Louis, April 21st through 24th. And if you're interested in attending and need any help with registration, if you'll contact Mary, she'll take care of it for you. The copy of the agenda is provided. Behind the first colored sheet is just a information concerning the 59th Annual 2013 Conference for the National Association of State Retirement Administrators, which will be held in Portland, August 3rd through the 7th, and we'll be providing more information on that as it becomes available. Probably at your April meeting, there'll be more an agenda as it relates to that. Then behind the next tab is the National Conference on Council on Future Retirement Annual Convention, their 90th, which will be held October 5th through the 9th in Washington, D.C. And then for those of you who are interested and have not participated in the International Foundation for Employee Benefits Plan CAP program, there's information related to that. Parts 1 and Parts 2 are being offered in Chicago, June 25th through the 28th. As those of you who have been through it know, you can take just one part at a time. However, you can take all parts. You do not have to take Part 1 prior to taking Part 2. There's no prerequisite. It's just two different schedules of. So if you're interested again and need any assistance as far as planning or registration, just let us know and we'll be happy to assist you. Behind tab 12B, just a reminder, each of you as board members have to file with the Mississippi Ethics Commission a economic interest disclosure form. You do this online. If you don't have the capability to do it online, if you'll let us know, we'll help you do that. But there's just some information about how to do it. You basically just go to their website, click on it, and it will walk you through. And then finally, Mr. Chairman, I sent out a notice as it relates to this before the meeting. I have requested that if it did not conflict with the board member schedule, that we would look at the possibility of moving the June board meeting from the 25th and 26th to June 17th and 18th, which would allow me to attend the NCTR Directors Meeting, which is a workshop that is held on an annual basis and limited to just my peers. And it is something that I feel is of value and would like to attend if it is acceptable to change that board meeting. If not, then we'll leave it as is.
Did everyone have an opportunity to check the calendar? So I guess we need a motion to change the meeting date.
Also moved.
Second. So a motion and a second to change the June meeting date to June 17th and the committee meeting on, June board meeting on the 18th, committee meetings on the 17th. Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you. With that, Mr. Chairman, let's vote.
First thing here, do I need to file this ethics report this year?
Yes, sir.
This is sort of backward.
Yes, sir. This will be basically the last time. You won't need to fire to file it next year, but you will
It
need
will
to.
not take long for a retired student person to file that report.
Now, if I'm becoming unethical, class, you don't have to do it.
You know, if you want to have a teacher, you don't have enough money to be on it.
Is there any other business? Not, I need a motion to adjourn. So moved. Second. Motion is second. Thank y'all very much.